Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on YouTube.com/Mike Mercado2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast to like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.
Welcome in, friends, to the best damn pop culture podcast in Chicago, in the universe, in the multiverse, in the Spider-Verse, in a galaxy far, far away, in the Speed Force. You're on the Quarantine Files, brought to you by the Good Brothers here on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the one, the only, the good brother himself, Alex Mercado. How's it going, good brother?
Hola, Mike.
Good brother. We continue on our journey as we all try to get through these crazy times during this pandemic by giving our fans our top 5 list, and they have been very compelling, very competitive, debated, highly debated, some will say. And today's episode, we continue on with that. Good brother, what did your evil mind come up with?
So on today's episode, we will be covering franchises. And what made me think of this list is not only that we just did billion-dollar films last week, but also that we did reviews for Scoob, the new Scooby-Doo movie. It made me really think of what would be your favorite franchises. Very tough list. There are so many amazing franchises out there throughout different genres. I'm going to say this much. Out of our 2 lists, we have 4 franchises that are similar and 2 in the same spot.
Very interesting, which we have agreed on a lot of different things, but we've also had very different lists when we are on different sides of the fence. Now, were there any parameters when we were making this list? Did there have to be X amount of movies? Did there have to be an X? Like, what were the rules that you had established when we were making these lists?
To me, it had to be 3 or more, at least substance. So for me, some film franchises also have a TV franchise or a line of clothing or toys, or, we really wanted to make it a broad franchise sort of thing of you had to have a minimum of, like, I would consider Avatar a franchise, even though they only have 1 film, yet there are certain films that maybe do have multiple I wouldn't consider a franchise. So this list, the ones we picked tend to be very popular anyway, but there were a lot that we could have chose from and a lot that aren't going to make our top 5.
And I'm super excited to see what you have on your list. But before we get to that, good brother, I start off our shows, and I will start off with my number 5 franchise, and it is Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Trilogy. Now, this is a series that obviously is just 3 movies in its own. It's the rarity where a lot of people will argue, as great as The Dark Knight is, some people prefer Batman Begins. This is a series that shows 3 different stages of a beloved character. And it's interesting, in a series or in a universe that we've seen so many different iterations of this character on the silver screen, in one series, we got to see all the formations of Batman that we've always read about in the comic books and seen in the cartoons. The strength of the Dark Knight Trilogy also goes into the cinema aspect of it. It is such a great series of films. It is shot beautifully. The score is amazing. The acting is amazing. The writing is top tier. The source material is legendary. The Dark Knight comes in as a franchise. Take Batman alone. If The Dark Knight in its own, if you were just to take all of the stuff that was made and distributed, you would have all the swag that is Heath Ledger's Joker. You would have all the Blu-rays. You would have all the video games. The extent that comes from the Dark Knight Trilogy is the Arkham Asylum. And the vision that we have of the Joker and Batman is of now some of the most bankable characters now. Spencer's went crazy with Heath Ledger's Joker. the importance of the Dark Knight trilogy cannot go understated, and that is why it is my number 5 top franchise.
I put it a little higher, and I would say this much for now. The Dark Knight trilogy is as close to perfect, I would say perfect, as any superhero film can do and any Batman film can do. But it's a little higher for me.
And before I forget it, because we could gush about this series all we want. We have the Blu-ray, all this stuff. We all know. Anybody who listens to the Quarantine Files knows this. But the reason why I don't have it higher on the list is, as you could see when we go through this, the Dark Knight Rises, comparative to the rest of the series, is a big enough downfall where it hurts where it went compared to some of these other ones in the list. And we'll get to that in a little bit, especially with my number 4. But before we get to my number 4, what did you have at number 5, good brother?
My number 5 is the Toy Story franchise. And I love this franchise. I grew up with this franchise. Literally, the year I was born, a few years before was the original Toy Story. And Toy Story 2 was a few years down the line when I was a little older. And 2010 with Toy Story 3, the year I graduated high school. And then just last year with Toy Story 4 being a very emotional growing up story of, it's okay to do your own path in life and your own journey, where part 3 was sticking together as a family and growing up. The reason it doesn't make my list a little higher is I think 1 doesn't age well visually and story-wise. 2 is great. 2 is really, really great. Can't really say anything bad about 2 or 3. And then 4 just feels, I don't want to say a bit unnecessary, because I think any film is necessary if there's an audience, and obviously $1 billion and an Oscar later, it was necessary, but we could have done without. And I think that's 1 and 4 are kind of the reason it doesn't move up on my list. And again, we're talking about film franchises that all have an arguing to be number 1 even. So it's going to be real difficult kind of separating where we want to put them on our list. But I have the Toy Story franchise at number 5.
I have the Toy Story franchise a little bit higher on my list, so we'll get to my thoughts on that franchise as we continue here on the Quarantine Files. But my number 4 franchise, good brother, is The Lord of the Rings. Again, this is now a strength and the difference between, let's say, the Dark Knight trilogy and the Lord of the Rings original trilogy. Now, The Dark Knight is my favorite movie in this entire bunch. And then probably Batman Begins might be number 2, but Return of the King is a very close second. Here's the difference, though. The Two Towers is the weakest film in that entire series. The Two Towers is a great film, nominated for Academy Awards, monster film like the other two. It is stronger, and it was not the finale. What hurts the Dark Knight trilogy, in my opinion, on my list, is simply the fact it ended more on a thud, if you could say that, in one of the greatest franchises of all time, comparative to The Return of the King. Now, you could talk about the 20-minute ending that may have lasted too long. It did not change the fact that that movie won the most Academy Awards at that time. So it obviously hit well enough, and it obviously made a big impact enough for Peter Jackson and that entire studio that it's different when you stick the landing a lot better, opposed to you maybe have dropped the ball a little bit in the in-between part, opposed to The Dark Knight, where it was the best movie, just so happened to be the one straight in the middle. Here's another thing too. The Lord of the Rings made it cool for fantasy to come back. It made it possible for franchises to believe in a lot of these films that we are getting now and that they are pushing the limits. You could see movies kind of get their inspiration from The Lord of the Rings in the sense of taking source material that we thought only had a niche audience, but didn't realize that the global appeal to it. And between that and Harry Potter, it was an interesting dynamic. And the difference of Academy Award nominations and love from the critics and that level is what made Lord of the Rings something that will be lived on for generations, forever. That this is they'll talk about that movie being can you ever remake The Lord of the Rings? You can make sequels. I think the importance of how strong it was critically, and the fact that while The Dark Knight has an Academy Award for Heath Ledger and probably deserves one for Best Picture in 2008, it doesn't change the fact that 73 and 9 doesn't mean a thing without the ring, right? 72 and 10 doesn't mean a thing without the ring. It's the same thing with the Lord of the Rings. The last one won all the Academy Awards, broke all the records, it has the trophies. To me, it's a stronger trilogy in that sense. That's why it's a bigger franchise. I have the Lord of the Rings at number 4.
It's fine. Lord of the Rings is a fine franchise. You know my opinion about it. I've gone on and said it's very self-indulgent. The only positive for me is that it gave us Game of Thrones. I think you're going to notice on my list that Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter both don't make it. I think that's a taste thing where the only wizards I want to see are in space. I do think, like you said, where the Dark Knight trilogy may end with a thud, at least it's a thud and not a whisper and not a limp to the finish line. Um, I think that when we talk movies on this list, Lord of the Rings has three films, and out of those three, yes, the last one is one of the greatest films on our list in general when we talk about franchises. But with part one being very good and setting it up, and part two being such a limp, I just couldn't put it on my list. It didn't even make my honorable mentions. Again, my positive is Game of Thrones, but yeah, Lord of the Rings is a fine franchise.
Would you say that you're the outlier to the rule when it comes to The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter?
Yeah, obviously, I understand why it has its audience, and I respect that audience. It's just not my taste. And I've tried with Lord of the Rings, and I have watched them. Harry Potter, I'll leave judgment up, but I have not watched all the films, and I'm kind of waiting as a nice little surprise and watch them all, and then I'll be able to have an opinion. I have watched Lord of the Rings twice through, and I don't enjoy them. And again, I feel Game of Thrones was my Lord of the Rings done better. So
No, it's true, and especially depending on the closeness and when you watched them, how you watched them, and Game of Thrones definitely is what happens when the maturation of Lord of the Rings and what they were able to do and set that foundation for all these movies moving forward. You can thank Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson if Dune ends up being a great film, what everybody thinks it's going to be. Because if it wasn't for the Lord of the Rings, we don't get that. Just like the same way about the Dark Knight. If we don't get the Dark Knight, we don't get any of these movies moving forward. So it's a very interesting conversation. But good brother, what did you have in at number 4?
again, I think you're gonna start seeing taste, like our style of taste, now that Lord of the Rings is out of the way, of franchises we like. When it came down to it, I wanted to pick a Marvel franchise now, and it was really tough because there's a lot of choices in there. You can have the Thor franchise, the Iron Man franchise, the Cap franchise. I personally selected the Avengers franchise. I love Avengers 1. It revolutionized team up superhero movies. Age of Ultron, as much as Ultron himself doesn't deliver, I think the film is very good. I think the chemistry with the superheroes gets even better. And my personal favorite, I love that we see more team up moves like you do in the video games. I think that's Age of Ultron really starts that off. And then Infinity War and Endgame combine a 20 plus movie franchise. It creates this whole basically 5 hour epic finale in it, and it's fantastic and it's great and it's emotional, and it has the most superheroes on screen we're probably ever going to see until we get an Avengers Secret War of sorts. So Avengers was my number 4 film franchise.
I absolutely adore the Avengers franchise. I love everything that has to do with Marvel. I think the only reason that the Avengers, specifically the 4-part series, doesn't make it, I think it's a mental block with me because of trilogies. I keep kind of resting on that. It's so important for you to do a three-peat. I mean, it's something maybe in athletics that kind of crossed over when we're doing this type of conversation. But at the end of the day, I love Age of Ultron, but I love Age of Ultron as much as I love Ant-Man or Ant-Man and the Wasp or Guardians 2. Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame are some of the greatest comic book movies ever. And in its own, that franchise deserves it. Obviously, it deserves every accolade it's going to ever get when it comes to those specific movies. I think Age of Ultron, what benefits it is it's the second one. But I think there is a big dip between Avengers and then you get Age of Ultron to the next two. I think the first one and the last two are just such heavy hitters that it's hard for me. Am I crazy for thinking that? And I like Age of Ultron a lot. And then you have James Spader, who's one of the great actors at that time and coming off the Blacklist and whatnot. It was great, but the film to me is a little weak. Am I a little crazy to think that Age of Ultron kind of skews a little bit that entire Avengers run if we're talking about it, critiquing it that much?
If you hadn't had your stupid ass Hobbit movie before, I would say no. I would respect your opinion. The fact that you have a franchise with towers and you won't forgive Ultron, that's your big dividing point. I think that's a little unfair because both have similar negatives, if you will. Like I said, the only problem with Ultron to me is Ultron. I think the film itself is actually very good. I like the way they introduce characters. The fight scenes are great. The story itself is not bad. It's just Ultron himself doesn't really deliver Ultron seems more like a series bad guy, like kind of a Loki where you want him at least twice. And I think the mistake was only doing him once. But yeah, I think you're completely insane and unfair in your opinion, Mike. How dare you have an opinion that's different than mine?
Absolutely. But also, for the longest time, I've let you just disparage the name of the Two Towers because you find it a little boring. That movie has
Everyone
a 95% critically and on the audience on Rotten
So
Tomatoes.
you're telling me that a normal opinion isn't that the Two Towers isn't that good?
No, the normal opinion is...
That's not crazy. Like, that's a universal opinion, like Ultron, that Two Towers is not very good in Lord of the Rings terms.
Typically, it's the least like of the trilogy, but to say it's a bad movie or that it's a boring movie or to talk about it as if it's not literally one of the greatest movies of all time is kind of crazy. But
well,
with that,
you asked, and I think Age of Ultron is very similar to that opinion. If you don't like one because of their number two, it should stand. But again, these are opinions. Mike, what's fun is now the next two are actual similar ones because now I think you and me have both discovered that our number ones will be different.
That's going to be really interesting to see. And we continue on with this heated episode of the Quarantine Files because my number 3 pick, good brother, and top franchises. Oh, very interesting. So, good brother.
The next two are the exact same.
What do we have at number 3?
We have the Godfather franchise, and I'll take the lead on this one since I announced it and I want to. I love the Godfather franchise. I think Godfather 1 and 2 are two of the greatest films of all time. Every day it changes for me. I like it more. I'm going to say this about Godfather 3. I think we'll use your Lord of the Rings argument. I understand that it's a joke, and I understand it's the language we use. Godfather 3 is an Oscar-nominated movie. Godfather 3 is a very, very, very well-done good movie. Does it compare to the godliness of 1 and 2? Not even close, and that's unfair. Should we have expected it to? I mean, I don't blame us for having expectations of that when you have part 1, which is a perfect movie. Somehow you recreated it, and even some say go above and beyond in part 2 to make another perfect film. I understand where people were disappointed in part 3. I truly think it's actually a very underappreciated film. It ends the trilogy very well. It's a very modern telling of that family story, and it is an Oscar-nominated movie. I know sometimes Oscars mean jack. Sometimes they do. There'll always be crashes out there. But I think it's funny that we both have Godfather number 3, and we're basically throwing away our arguments from 4 and 5 because Godfather 1 and 2 are so good, and just the universe you created, it makes our top 3.
And it's funny. It's very ironic and even hypocritical. You're right about us kind of saying that, but there's a reason why every director, every screenwriter, every producer, every studio is trying to make the next Godfather, the next Godfather 2. These are two of the greatest movies ever. That's it. That's the statement, period. You don't have to give a reason why. When you're defending Godfather 3, the problem is you're trying, like you mentioned, you're trying to live up to this next movie, these two classics. But it's also the fact that you made a movie in the 90s and people's tastes were different. And Godfather 3 was not like Goodfellas. It was not like Casino. It wasn't like these movies that Martin Scorsese was making that were a little bit more violent.
It was simple. It was very simple.
Comparative to what gangster movies would become, especially. So I think Godfather 3 had that going against it more than anything. But as a movie, it's a really good movie. And the symbolism, something as simple as this. One of my favorite scenes of all time, and a spoiler alert for Godfather 3, when they kill his daughter and you see him trying to scream. And I forgot who said it, but it was very well pointed. It's as if he was trying to scream to God and God wasn't listening. And if you're a fan of The Godfather, if you love and loathe Michael Corleone, you know how deep that quote cuts. Because this was a guy who started off as the all-American boy, who became and rose to the biggest mafia boss of all time, trying to hide his sins, to becoming an old man thinking that because he tried to buy his way into politics, that his way into heaven, to clear his soul, is to bribe God himself and to lose the thing he loved the most. I adore the Godfather series, and I wish Godfather 3 came out in a different time, in a different era, because it is a really interesting study case. It is a different movie than the first two. But I promise, if you guys haven't seen it, Godfather 3 is worth watching. It is a funny inside baseball joke. You're the Godfather 3 of the series. If 6 Oscar nominations is Godfather 3, you're doing good things. Good brother, speaking of good things, what do we have in at number 2?
We have, well, I think what be people's most arguable thing against us is we have Star Wars at our number 2. You know how I think you and me are the same. Star Wars makes us happy. Doesn't matter if I personally love all the movies and love all the shows, but I'm the wrong person to ask about that sometimes. And you love the universe in general, and you have very good opinions on which movies you like and what shows you like. Star Wars makes us happy. Star Wars as a universe, I think it defies franchise, where even if you don't love the movies, you can love the characters. If you don't love the TV shows, you love the theme park, or there's something for you. Maybe the books, maybe the video games. I think they've done the best job, or one of the best jobs, of just creating this world that's beyond storytelling almost, where you could tell your own story in this universe. And every time that crawl comes up, every time the noise comes up, every time I see a Wookiee, it makes me happy. And I think Star Wars, that's why it's so high on our list, is because it created this world that just brings people together, makes them happy. There's so much wonderment and just so much to see and so much to discover that we still haven't yet. And every generation, it gets more and more. And I just love everything Star Wars.
And I think the idea of comfort food is something that we don't use a lot in media. We use it a lot with, obviously, food itself and like stuff close to home. But what Star Wars is, before social media, because there's always been a divisive crowd when it became to Star Wars. The difference is now, obviously, you state an opinion. God forbid you actually like a movie, or God forbid you actually hate a movie, that people come and attack you. But the thing about Star Wars is that you could get lost. And it's one of the rare things where I can make a sound. You can hear one of the guns go off. You can hear a lightsaber go on. You can hear Darth Vader breathing. You can hear a TIE fighter. You can hear an X-Wing. And you can imagine it in your head. And if you were to close your eyes and I was to play a sound effect, it would bring an emotion to you. It would bring a memory to you. You know all the quotes. You've worn the clothes. Even if you've never watched the movie, you know who Luke Skywalker is. There is a sense of unity and a sense of community within Star Wars. And over the years, with pop culture and nerd culture taking over mainstream, it kind of lost a little bit of it because the innocence of being a nerd, watching Star Wars, getting lost, learning about the Republic, learning about the Empire. I mean, there was something to it. You had to go dive deep into it. And when anything becomes as mainstream as Disney Star Wars, it's going to lose something. But it doesn't change the fact that every single time a new cartoon came out, a new toy line came out, a new movie series came out, a new Halloween costume came out, we were all there to buy it because Star Wars matters. That is our Asgard that we created, is a galaxy far, far away. And I think the importance of it, even if you like one movie, even if you only like Empire or Return or A New Hope, or you like the prequels, or Jar Jar's your favorite, or you love what happened with Rey, there's a movie there for someone. And I think that's what makes it so lovable. It makes it very exciting. And it's one of the only universes where fans really do create their own lore. And a lot of people accept it. And, you know, the only other series out there is somebody that's in my honorable mentions. But I think it's very interesting how Star Wars has just become so part of the world that even when everybody hates it, we all know we're going to go see the movie. How often do you do that? Where even if we are sick and disgusted the last thing we saw, or we're the happiest, it doesn't matter. We're all going to go see Star Wars. I mean, what else can you say about the greatest franchise of all time? Let's be honest, marketably.
Well, here's what I'll say going forward is I think you and me will agree that Disney was one of the best things to happen to Star Wars, because what Disney did with Star Wars is it made it accessible to everyone. And I think sometimes with these franchises, and on both our lists that we love so much, that maybe they exclude a new audience. And I think Star Wars never does that. Star Wars, like you said, is almost the comfort of nerdism. It's a very easy way to enter the field. And I think Disney, some people scoff at Disney for buying Star Wars, but I think without Disney buying Star Wars, we never expand the way it really has with the theme parks and the books and the shows. And Like I said, like you said, you may not like the movies, but look at Baby Yoda and look at The Mandalorian or look at the cartoons. Like, there's something there for everyone. And I would truly say, even though we both have different number ones, Star Wars would be franchise, or arguably is it.
Yeah, and I mean, think about this BD1 in Jedi Fallen Order, one of the more popular games that came out that year, created its own lore, its own franchise. They're already making a part two. Like, it's just everywhere. It's going to outlive us. It has become one with Mickey Mouse. And when you can say that Luke Skywalker is right there with Mickey Mouse, that should show the importance of it. Now, I think what you and I try to do is obviously acknowledge it, but we also wanted to show a little bit more attention to different things, and we had different criteria of what we're talking about franchises, but there's nothing that's ever going to make more money or be more important to the universe than Star Wars.
Exactly.
And good brother, we finally finish off our list. My number one top franchise is Toy Story. Even if you think the first one ages badly, it still looks better than most movies that come out today. It's an innovator. The casting, phenomenal. So great that the voices are synonymous with those characters, even though some of those people have won multiple Academy Awards. Some of the greatest writers in Hollywood have came from that franchise. The importance of Toy Story to a generation is why I think a lot of what we're seeing politically and socially can be taken back to Toy Story. It was the most popular, innovating series growing up for our generation, between you and I and that little, and even Super Mercado Bro Marcos, that 5-year gap of an era. It taught us everything. It went with technology with us. It went through the world changing. It went through political correctness. It went through women becoming the heroes. It changed the way we saw of cinema. And then you can never take away Tom Hanks, the importance of that man's voiceover work as Woody. Tim Allen, comedic genius when it came to his timing, the way he portrayed Buzz Lightyear. But what Tom Hanks does as an actor, everybody was always talking about Tom Hanks being this great actor. Now we always hear about Matt Damon. Well, he joined this franchise. And when Tom Hanks had his franchise, and it was Toy Story. Every movie mattered. Every script mattered. There's never been a bad Toy Story film. And even in Toy Story 4, if it was quote-unquote unnecessary, it was a story that when it was told was perfect. So yeah, we could have ended at 3. We didn't have to. And then Forky Ask a Question on Disney Plus is one of the best shows out there. They've created an amazing world. They made us believe that toys can talk. And there's not many things that can make the imagination go the way Toy Story did. And the fact that it was Pixar. Say what you will about any other company, Pixar might be the most important studio of the 21st century. Without Pixar, do we get the Avengers? Does that technology go that way? With Shrek and Jurassic World becoming what it was. We saw the technology coming. CGI sucked. What they did was forever indebted for Hollywood to them. Toy Story is my number one franchise.
All right, let me tell you why you're wrong. I love Toy Story. Mike knows that's our favorite anime. And I think it's funny that this list turned out the way it did, that both of our number 5s were each other's number 1. Because my number 1 is The Dark Knight, which is the obvious correct choice. The Dark Knight trilogy, let's go through this. It's one of the best trilogies of all time. It's the best superhero trilogy of all time. Fact. It is Christopher Nolan's best trilogy. Fact. And only trilogy. Fact. It made billions of dollars. Fact. It has an Oscar. Fact. It has one of the most star-studded cast in any film trilogy franchise ever. It starts off with a simple Batman Begins, the best origin story of any superhero. Fact. At the time, the best Batman movie ever. And we get a simple beginning with Ra's al Ghul, who, unless you were a hardcore Batman fan, which most people are, you didn't really know who that was. And Liam Neeson does a perfect job at that. And we get the setup, and we get one of the best cliffhanger endings in history with the Joker card. Come part 2, we open up with Heath Ledger's Oscar-winning performance. Arguably, he won the Oscar in 14 minutes in that opening scene. I remember when they released the scene in IMAX, people were buying tickets to movies they didn't want to see this scene. Obviously, Dark Knight goes on to be one of the most successful superhero films of all time. And then here's where it gets it may have ended with a thud in Dark Knight Rises. It was necessary. And I truly believe that movie is very underrated. Is it 20 minutes too long? Yes. Is Tom Hardy's Bane super memorable and very quotable and we still talk about to this day? Yes. Was Anne Hathaway's Catwoman probably up there with Michelle Pfeiffer's? Yes, it was. This ending for Batman, it's probably one of the most simple yet perfect endings a Batman, a person playing Batman, a series involving Batman could end. So simple, so sad, yet so hopeful, and chances for a future, but we didn't need it. It didn't outlive itself. Christopher Nolan ended when it needed to end. And again, you may say a thump. I say, well, maybe an extra 20 minutes too long, but still a fantastic movie with two clear, perfect movies to start off the franchise. So that's why The Dark Knight is the obvious number one. And to my good brother, who I see plenty of Batman and Dark Knight posters in the office, and I know he owns the special edition Blu-rays and things. I know he doesn't own the Toy Story versions of that. So I would like to say Dark Knight is the number one for the good brothers.
So while you are correct that to me, The Dark Knight is the better of all the movies I'm about to say, here's the difference. First off, what hurts, obviously, The Dark Knight Rises, and what could have maybe changed the entire complexion of this, Heath Ledger's untimely passing. Part 3 was supposed to be a different movie than we got. And who knows what Christopher Nolan had in store for us. Now, I'm not going to count that against him, but that's something that I can't help but ever not think about. Knowing and being so deep into the lore and into the internet rumors and just wanting to see that scene of Heath Ledger by himself in Arkham in a single cell while the rest of the world is in chaos. That's all I can ever think about. It's all I ever wanted as a nerd in a film. But unlike The Dark Knight, The Lord of the Rings, The Godfather, and Star Wars, all movies that are billion-dollar franchises, have Academy Awards, literally in the lifeblood of this country and in the universe of cinema. The only one on the list that arguably, and I won't even say arguably, statistically made money and critically smashed with the audience and the critics is Toy Story. Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3. And you know what? You can't take away results. You can't. You can't take away what the championships that they did win. They never lost. Nothing ever dethroned the trilogy and even part 4. All $1 billion, all 95 and above, never a stinker. Nobody ever says they hate. Unless they're arguing against the point, you will never hear anybody say, I hated Toy Story 1, 2, or 3. They are beloved movies.
You will hear 4, though. You will hear 4. And we cannot forget, Toy Story makes number 5 on my list. And it should be top 3. And if we had done trilogies, I would be honest, if we had done trilogies, it might be number 1. We're talking franchises. Not only is nothing bigger than Batman in general, Batman is above anything. Batman is one of the biggest characters in the United States and in the world. But part 4 did happen. And part 4, yes, all these movies critically that we're talking about are all very high in Rotten Tomatoes. All 7 of them. But part 4 is probably the most unliked movie out of all the 7 movies we're talking about.
Oh, I disagree. I definitely think Toy Story 4 is more beloved than The Dark Knight Rises.
I disagree.
That's an interesting conversation for a different day, but it goes to show, if you've been paying attention to us here on The Good Brothers, why the same movies keep coming up and the same type of movies keep coming up. And I think it's because they are so impactful. I mean, Toy Story, Star Wars, The Godfather, Lord of the Rings, The Dark Knight. You mentioned in the Marvel Universe, the Avengers movies. And I'm sure we have some things that we're going to get to right now when it comes to honorable mentions. These are tentpole movies that are worldwide. And, you know, it's not just about money, though. This is the big thing. Because Fast and the Furious is a great franchise when it comes to making money. Film-wise, though, it has maybe 3 good movies out of like 10? Which is like, okay, you made 10 movies, but a lot of franchises have made a lot of movies. That doesn't make you a good franchise. A successful franchise is different than a good franchise. And I think that's very important after we made our list and we're talking about that. There's going to be a lot of movies that people didn't see. And I think that's the difference. There's a lot of movies that made a lot of money. There's a lot of movies that made a lot of merchandise. That doesn't make them a good franchise. It makes them a successful one. And those are 2 different things.
Yeah, I completely agree, honestly, because if you ask anyone else, their list is going to be very different than our list, or even very similar. But there's a lot of franchises we didn't get to talk about. I know plenty of people who I guarantee Fast and Furious is one of their favorite franchises. If I ask my dad his favorite franchises, it's going to be Fast and Furious, The Expendables, and London Has Fallen, and Washington Has all those Fallen movies. None of those would make my list. But franchises do different things for different people. Like, I know we'll get to honorable mentions right now, but there's a lot of horror franchises.
That's a
what
great
the horror
point.
Genre is, honestly.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because as you were saying that, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, we have a lot of fans and we have a lot of friends that are diehard horror people. And like, obviously, some of the greatest horror franchises are franchises, and there are some really good ones that have some deep, heavy hits in them. So I think that's fascinating that even though you and I are really big horror marks, we didn't have any horror films in our list.
I'll say this. I'll start off our honorable mentions by saying my number 6 was actually the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And again, the reason it doesn't make the top 5 is just there's a lot of bad stuff in there, but I do love the franchise, and it was very close. So as horror fans, that was my number 6. 3 more just random honorable mentions I had was the Back to the Future franchise. Again, I don't love parts of Part 2 and 3, but great franchise, great universe. Shrek, arguably the only counterpart to Toy Story. A lot of good in there. The most recent one, again, not my favorite. And one that I think goes really underappreciated because we talk so much about Dark Knight, but the original Batman franchise, there's a charm to it, and there's a certain fun universe building they do in those 4 movies, even though they switch up the character in 2 of them, or they switch the main actor. I do enjoy them in a silly stance, and I think they're different. Part 4, Batman and Robin ages so bad that it's good almost now.
And if we're going to bring up the 89 to 98 Batman, from Batman, Batman Forever, Batman Returns, and Batman and Robin, I think we have to then mention Christopher Reeve's Superman.
Oh, no, I completely disagree. I think Christopher Reeve's Superman has one good Superman, and that's it.
Oh, no, the first 2 Superman are really good. The first 2.
I think Part 2 is very overrated, and I think 3 and 4 aren't bad. They're garbage, and they're not fun, rewatchable garbage like Batman and Robin or Batman Forever. I think they're terrible films in a whole different aspect. It's not cheesy bad. It's just bad.
All right, so I want you to say it now on record here on the Quarantine Files, brought to you by the Good Brothers here on Mercado Airwaves. Before I give you my honorable mentions, I want you to say it right now then, that Lord of the Rings is meh, and that Superman 1 and 2 are meh, and all these amazing, crazy...
Superman 1 is fantastic. Superman 1 is one of the best superhero films of all time. Superman 2 is very overrated.
So you don't like them going against Zod, is what you're telling me?
Oh, no. I think that ending is so bad, the way to defeat them, it ruins the movie for me. And I know that's just me with Part 2. I stick by Part 3 and 4. They're garbage movies, and they don't even compare it to 3 and 4 of the Tim Burton Batman universe. But 2, I am in the minority. I'll agree. The ending, it's like you said earlier, the ending was so bad that it really affected my opinion of Part 2. But Part 1 is fantastic. It's a beautiful movie.
How dare you ever say anything bad about Richard Pryor and his horrible movies? And my honorable mentions, good brother, I have Harry Potter. My Marvel mention is Captain America, since you already took the Avengers. Nice. Yeah, Captain America, first Avenger, awesome. Winter Soldier, Civil War.
Man, if only Iron Man 2 wasn't terrible.
I know, right? Because I actually really enjoy Iron Man 3, even though I know a lot of people give it crap. Good brother, this is the one that I mentioned when we were talking about Star Wars. An honorable mention, Star Trek. This is a very important series when it comes to science fiction moving forward. I think people always confuse the two. Star Wars and Star Trek, obviously the jokes being aside, they're 2 different things. One is fantasy that happens to deal with space. One is science fiction. There are 2 different things, and they're very important. I wish Star Trek was more beloved because it's a very thinking man.
I wish Star Trek was fun.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a very fair thing to say. I do wish Star Trek was just a little bit more fun, entertaining, in popcorny way, but I think when it comes to a philosophical writing story, Star Trek has some great, from Voyager to The Next Generation to some of these movies, like Star Trek is super important, good brother.
Yeah, it's fine.
God help you. Good brother, let's run down this list.
I think it does such a bad job welcoming new fans, and they've had opportunities, and I've tried, and I'll give J.J. Abrams credit. If those movies, I think, had been delivered by the studios better and more open, I think it would have been more successful and audience would have came out even more. But I think the studio dropped it more than J.J. Abrams did.
I mean, that's interesting. It's he's the only guy that got both Star Trek and Star Wars fans pissed off. So shout out to JJ about that. Good brother, let's run down these bad boys. You got to go coach the future of America. At number 5 on our top 5 franchises, I have The Dark Knight. The good brother has
Toy Story.
At number 4, I have The Lord of the Rings. The good brother has
The Avengers.
At number 3, we have
The Godfather franchise.
And at number 2, the good brother and I have
Star Wars.
At number 1, my top franchise, Toy Story. The good brother had
the podcast that we've decided number 1 will be The Dark Knight.
And I guess, good brother, since we have made it to the end of this list, I think unanimously the top franchise would be Star Wars. The top movie would be The Dark Knight.
Yeah, and here's what's fun. So I'm going to tell you right now, our next list next week is actually going to be our exact same. I'm going to give us the same order. So we're going to go, I'll give you the order. You are now next week going to pick your favorite film in each franchise for our list.
So that's very fun. So the films that are on my list, the franchise on my list will now have to be individualized by movies within those franchises. So that is going to be phenomenal.
So now your list will change slightly because, again, I know you're not going to put The Dark Knight in number 5. So now you determine where your argument might be. Where does Dark Knight go against Toy Story 3? And that might
good
be
brother.
an opinion.
Good brother.
Maybe we start arguing something else.
Good brother, you are an evil, evil man because you're telling me that in a triple threat Hell in a Cell match, I have to pit Godfather 2 versus The Dark Knight versus Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly, and I think it's going to be fun. But here's what we're going to do now is it's not going to be as much of a number list as much as of a debate. So we're both going to have to pick a Toy Story film at number 4. We're both going to have to pick a Star Wars film at number 2. And that's how we're going to kind of do the list next week is we're going to use our same information we have now. Our number 5s will be the individual franchises we chose. So in mine will be the Avengers. Yours would be the token characters. And we're going to try to figure out why we like a certain movie in that franchise over the other films in that franchise.
I absolutely love it, good brother. And for all you people who want to see what we're up to and get other sneak peeks of stuff coming down the podcast network, make sure you're following us all over the socials. The good brother is on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Play video games with us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. Like, rate, review, and shares wherever you get your favorite podcast. Give us 5 stars and leave us a nice comment wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. And visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves, the home to our interviews with athletes and celebrities that you get ad-free and before anyone else at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. For the good brother himself, Alex Mercado.
Adios.
I'm the good brother, Mike Mercado. We'll see you on the next episode, The Quarantine Files, brought to you by the good brothers here on the Mercado Airwaves Network.
Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on youtube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast. So like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.